as we're working with these puppies, what would be the most common commands to teach them, to preparing them to go out into their next chapter?
How old are they?
They are 10 weeks now. Yeah, they
10
just
weeks.
hit 10 weeks this week.
Okay, okay. And how long have you had them?
We got them at
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Almost 7.
And can you remind me kind of the circumstances, how you found them?
City reached out to us and asked to help in a situation where they had 11 puppies that
Owner
needed-
surrender.
on an owner surrender.
Okay, so the owner, Brett, had either a purpose or accidental litter with their dog.
Accidental.
Second accidental litter.
Okay, so he
11 puppy litter.
11 puppies. That's a lot of
The
puppies
first
for one
litter
litter.
he said was 12, but in all fairness, we have fixed that dog, and she will no longer be having 12 and 11 litters.
So that owner had the dog with the puppies
Yes.
until about 8 weeks,
Six,
bef-
and a half.
7.
7 weeks or so, and then you guys took over
Yes.
shortly after that.
Mhm.
Okay. So as far as commands, what would be some commands or some things that would be good to start preparing them for the next chapter? Commands, not so much. I mean, we can go into commands, sure. We could go into potty commands, go potty. But the main things I would say priority-wise, which before we started, I know you guys mentioned this, but priority would be to try to get them to see as many people as possible.
Okay.
We're trying that.
And that's the tricky part, because so there are two socialization periods for dogs. There's the first 6 weeks, and then the next from 6 weeks to 16 weeks.
Okay.
So the first 6 weeks, and then the next 10 weeks after that. The first 6 weeks is the first socialization period, and that's where they learn to be dogs. So the first period where they're rubbing elbows, stepping on top of each other, communicating, nipping, communicating with mom, all of that, they're learning dog language. And it's very crucial. So it's great for them to be in a litter for the first 6 weeks. From 6 weeks to 7, 8 weeks roughly, that's when they typically will go to their homes, to their new owners. Well, from about week 6 to about week 16, and I know you guys are trying, which is good. They're seeing people, which is great. The following 16 weeks, or the following 10 weeks after that, are very important, because from that point forward, then it's time to now learn, quote unquote, human interaction. You know what I mean? Like not human language necessarily, but human interaction. So now this is the second socialization period. That's what it's called. In that period of time, you want them to see people. You want them to interact with people. So as far as commands go, I would say maybe potty. Go potty, you know what I mean? Like, you take them out for about a period of time for them to relieve themselves. As far as a verbal command, that would be maybe one that I would think about. But if we take commands aside, I would say the priority would be just people, people, people.
Okay.
You know what I mean? As much as possible.
What about for people who don't have puppies? What about just in general? Anyone with a dog, what's the basic commands they should know?
So, puppy aside,
Yeah.
let's say they get a dog that is 6 months of age or 2 years of age. One of the first commands, some of the commands that are really beneficial, is the dog's name. Dog's name is very important. Another command that is pretty important is, I think, potty. Potty is an important command. It seems pretty trivial, but it's important in that, and it's not necessarily the command itself, but the concept of pottying, because it doesn't matter how much you love the dog. If the dog has a potty issue, you're going to just not like the dog. It's just how it's going to be, and I've known a lot of people like that. The dog could be amazing, but if the dog doesn't understand the concept of potty training, you're not going to like that dog very long. You're going to be bothered by the constant hassle of dealing with that. So potty training would be another one. Name. Another command that would be very important, obviously, recall. You know what I mean? So which kind of goes hand in hand with the name. So name typically means pay attention or head in my direction. And then recall command, which actually means come back to me. That would be, those three will probably be the top three in my opinion. Name, so you know I'm talking to you, I'm trying to get your attention. Potty training, which is very important because without it, you're just not going to like the dog. And then recall, meaning you have to learn to come back to me.
Yeah, if they're running out in front of a car or anything like that,
Yeah,
it's important.
and certainly the recall can get complex. It could be something as simple as, yeah, I know you're in the other room, but when I call you, you have to come back. It could be much more complex than that, like the example you just described. The dog is running onto the street, and we got to call the dog back. That certainly is a bit more of a complex picture. We typically have to train that a little bit more because, you know, it's a number of things that could be.
And it's just the difference in the tone of you calling their name.
Could be, yeah. With a sensitive dog, yeah. A sensitive dog, you scream their name, they're going to stop, head in your direction, go, what's going on, mom? A more independent dog, they're not going to care. You could scream their name with a megaphone, and they'll still go, nope, that squirrel is more important. And so,
Always goes back to the squirrel.
squirrel, bunny, chicken, cat, dog, anything.
Okay, so then next question, and this is a kind of I think everyone borders on. What's the difference between positive and negative reinforcement?
That's a really good question. It's pretty in-depth question as well. So I'm going to keep it as concise, to the point, and brief as I can, because I mean that in itself is an entire lecture. So I'm going to condense it.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. So essentially, what positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement, in technical terms, they both mean we're going to encourage you to do more of that particular behavior. So for instance, if I want the dog to come back to me, that's encouraging the dog to do that behavior more frequently. So the difference between positive and negative reinforcement is, with positive reinforcement, we're encouraging the dog in a way that makes the dog go, I'm going to come back to you because I get paid when I come back to you. I get reward, affection, toy, etc. Negative reinforcement accomplishes the same exact goal, which is come back to me, but the reward is more, like the pressure is encouraging you to come back to me. You know what I mean? Like, hey, come on, hurry up, you got to come back to me. The pressure could be leash, it could be, electronic collar, it could be training collar, it doesn't matter. Whatever the dog deems, okay, there's a form of pressure that is pushing me into the behavior. But the goal is the same. So one of the biggest misconceptions about negative reinforcement is people think negative reinforcement is a punishment. Negative reinforcement is not a punishment, it's more of an encouragement. It'd be like if you were standing and I wanted you to sit and I grabbed your shoulders and I push you into sitting. You know what I mean? I'm encouraging you to sit. That would be negative reinforcement versus me telling you, Bill, I have $20 here. If you put your butt on the chair, I'm going to give you the $20. It's positive reinforcement. But in both instances, I'm encouraging you to do a particular behavior. Now, more fundamentally, how they're different, again, without getting too in-depth, positive reinforcement generates more excitability, which is why it's very popular. So if I give you $20, I tell you, if I give you $20 to sit, you're going to be more excited about the behavior, right? But with excitability also comes a little bit less focus because you're excited, right? If you see a person, a child that is super excited, you don't see a whole lot of focus. Whereas negative reinforcement is more focus, more like you need to sit down. Do you see what I mean? There's more pressure involved there, like, hey, Bill, you need to sit down. Now there's less excitability, but there's more focus. So essentially, without breaking them down any further than that, those are the fundamental differences between positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement.
It's like we have our puppies right now. They have one mission in life, and that is to untie your shoestrings.
Yeah.
And as funny as it sounds, it can become quite hard walking amongst
Yeah.
10 of
They're
them.
trying to grab your
They're playing
shoelaces.
tug of war with your shoestrings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like I've been trying to work on stopping that, and of course I'm dealing with I don't think there's even an egg in those heads yet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
working on doing that, and it's like is it something?
They're also feeding off each other
Uh-huh.
on top of that. So
Yeah, so like I'm like, okay, is it something that you just know, or do you something more that you know and you swat their mouth or nose where they've got my shoestrings going in? Obviously, when we have people coming over, but I don't want that behavior. People
Yeah.
coming to volunteer. One of our volunteers said after the first day they come over there in their rubber boots with no shoestrings.
yeah, it's not uncommon. I wanna see these puppies so they're gonna give you a better idea.
Okay.
So maybe after today or
Okay.
some other time we can figure
Whatever
out a
works around
time
your schedule, we'll make.
They
To-
sure are cute. I'll
to
say
check
that.
them out.
That's not a hint for you to take in.
I was just telling all the listeners how cute they really are.
Yeah, a lot of times when puppies are at that age, right around 10 weeks, they're more mobile, they're more aware of things. And on top of that, they're feeding off each other. They're actually now, they're going to behave different than they would if they were by themselves. But if you put them together, now all it takes is one of them to start tugging at your shoestrings. And then
Oh, yeah, no,
everybody's
it's-
not going to do it because
it's
now-
a domino effect.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more about that. You talked about collars for just a second ago. As we're working with these puppies, do you suggest that we use a harness, a collar, or a head halter when trying to teach them how to walk on a collar?
On a leash.
So for the
Or
little,
yes.
yeah, for the little ones, 10 weeks, normally what I'll do is if I'm working a very young puppy, the teaching them how to walk is, and maybe this is different than other people do it, but my priority when I work with a very young dog, like puppy, the teaching them how to walk is sort of kind of towards the bottom of my priority list. I don't really teach them that a whole lot because a couple of reasons. Teaching them to walk politely takes a lot of mental cognitive bandwidth for the dog. Because at that age they're curious about everything. They're so low to the ground, there's so many smells, and then you're trying to compete with all of that. And they're young, so their minds are just wide open to all kinds of stimuli. So they're going, oh my God, like all of this is going on. So yes, we can absolutely teach them to do it, but it takes a lot of effort on your part, a lot of effort on their part. And it's more of a trick than anything. You're not really letting them know.
I understand that because what got the question for me to ask you is like when we get what I'm going to call a 6 month to a year and a half old dog, majority of them do not know how to walk
Yeah,
on
yeah.
a leash, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I want these things to learn how to walk on a leash at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it's probably like you said, it's just not in the wheelhouse at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can. To get him started in the right direction, we'll use the leash and a collar. It can be a little buckle collar. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but a little buckle collar and a leash, or it could even be a line, like 550 cord, like a little parachute cord. And then just use that to teach them other things like place, come back to me. Things that, like if I teach the dog, go to place, that's just a one behavior, right? It's just one thing. They're just doing one thing. If I teach them to come back, that's just one behavior, come back. I could even teach them to down, that's one behavior, put your belly on the ground. But walking, it's like behavior, like step after step after step after step. You can. I'm not saying that it cannot be done. But what will happen is as you focus on, we're going to teach you how to walk, your sessions will have to be so short to be able to get them to keep up with, because the first 3 feet are going to be different than the next 3 feet, which are going to be different than the next 3 feet, because every step or 2 steps, it's like a brand new environment. You go to the next 2, 3 steps, it's a brand new environment. So it can certainly be done. But again, you're going to be putting a little bit extra effort. The dog's going to have to be putting a little bit of extra effort. And although I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, it can be done. It needs to be like an entirely separate, different thing. But for me to prepare them to get to that point, I'll teach them what the leash is in different contexts. So that way they're learning how to get manipulated with the leash. They're learning how to be led onto the place bed. They're learning how to be led in my direction. Because what I've noticed with the dogs that have never been trained when they're about 8, 9 months of age, a lot of times one of the reasons that they struggle with walking on a leash is not because they've never been taught to walk next to you. It's mostly that they've never really been on a leash. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That is the main issue. Like, you put them on a leash and they're like, what the heck is this? And they start kind of flipping out. It's not so much that they were not taught to walk politely, it's that they were not even introduced to a leash a whole lot. So that's where the struggle sort of comes in. So to prepare them for that, we'll use a leash and a collar for other things. So by the time we get to the walking, it's not the first time they're feeling a leash attached to their neck.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
A lot of our rescues come without knowing how to walk on a leash.
Yeah.
A lot of strays and stuff have never been
They've
on
never
one.
had a leash on them, yeah. So it's like putting a rope on any animal.
Yeah.
You put a rope, like a leash on a cat,
Yeah.
and it's never been on a leash, they're going to freak out. It's the same thing with a lot of dogs. So just putting a leash on them, a little bit of line, and even just letting them drag it, that alone will get them used to feeling something attached to their neck, which will make teaching them how to walk on a leash much easier a little bit later.
Nice.
Okay. So would clicker training help at all with the puppies one-on-one?
Yeah, absolutely. Clicker training, what clicker training is really good for is, and this is again a bit of a condensation of that topic. All clicker training is, you're marking moments in time to let the dog know that whatever you did at that precise moment was perfect. It's like taking a picture, like hitting a shutter on a camera. Lets the dog know that was perfect, which is why it's used with sea mammals, like dolphins, whales, because it allows the animal to learn in a snapshot, frame by frame, what it is that is perfect. And why the clicker is very effective at that is the click compared to your yes or your good, it's much more consistent than your good. Click is the same every single time, whereas your good has emotion behind it. The other thing too that the click does that the good or the non-clicker training does is the clicker has been studied and known for raising dopamine, which dopamine obviously increases the excitement, which higher excitement means the animal becomes more excited to learn, more excited to do the behavior more and more and more. So the click, like the actual sound of the click in itself, it raises the dopamine before they get the reward and during the training process, which is why a lot of clicker trained dogs are very, very excitable, which is again why it would be beneficial for training these puppies, which is why a lot of people use clickers to train the puppies. They get them really pumped and excited. But I would say it's not necessary. It's a huge bonus. It can be very beneficial, but again, not necessary. And the reason I confidently say it's not necessary is there are a lot of good trainers, a lot of good breeders. I mean, breeders that whelp their puppies, a lot of times they're not even doing clicker training, and it doesn't deter these puppies from being amazing dogs later on. And the use of the clicker is great, but it also does require a little bit of skill on the operator. You have to have an idea how to do it.
I think it's PetSmarts. I've gone to PetSmarts before, and you can see they got a little section.
Yeah, like a little training area.
Training area there, and it's like you got everybody sitting there in a circle with their adult dog.
Yeah.
and they're doing clicker training. So I guess it's for all ages.
It's all ages. It works on any animals. It's even been used on people, on like athletic applications.
Okay.
So literally what it does is it, you know, I don't know if you have a retractable pen around here. But anyway, so like if you think of a retractable pen, right, when you press that button, it gives a consistent click. So what it does is it tells the animal, the subject, whatever was happening at that precise moment was perfect. So whatever was happening at that precise moment was perfect. So it makes the subject more responsive to the progression in the training process. So for instance, you know, like if I were to teach a subject how to do, you know, place or something, right, or down, if I were to teach them through positive reinforcement with just food and my good boy, it would take them a certain period of time. If I do that same dog with food, but instead of my good boy, I use a click, the dog will learn it faster. Because the click is much faster, it captures the moment much better, and it's much, much more mechanical and neutral than my good boy.
Gotcha.
So it's already conducive to, you know, to having the subject pick it up faster.
Okay. So, last question here. Okay, so I used to work in Dallas back in my younger days, and that was my first experience of everybody gets their very expensive. I think back then it was only $2,000 to get their prized hunting bird dog, and then they would spend more money sending it off to be trained, and then sometimes they were going to California from Dallas, or they were going all over the country.
Yeah.
And getting their dogs trained, and I associated that, okay, you know, you get your hunting dogs, you send off to training. Well, okay, so let the decades go by, and you start seeing other people get other dogs besides hunting dogs, and they start sending them off to training for various reasons. But I find it's okay to send your dog to a board and training program, because what I was learning, these people were sending their dogs for like 6 to 8 weeks away for training, and that's something you do. I mean, but you have I was, okay, so the video that right now that keeps popping up for me on social media for you, I mean, it looks so Halloween. You're out there in your little your padded suit. It looks like you're holding some skeletons up there, and when the dog goes crazy, it looks like attacking the skeletons. Well, but I take it, people are sending dogs to you for specific training, for personal protection. People are sending dogs to you for, well, like in Hank's case, to learn how to communicate, 'cause he's deaf. But then people are sending them for just general behavioral to make, an overall, make it a better house dog, house pet on that. So I mean, it's there's no stigma in sending your dog off to be board and trained.
No, there isn't. There are some instances in which it's not the most appropriate situation, and there are instances in which it is the best option. So, for instance, if I have a client, and I've had clients that I've talked to, and they even told me, I want to bring my dog to you for training, so for you to keep him for, you know, a period of time. And I've actually had to tell them, no, it's not the best option for you.
It's easier.
Yeah, it's easier in theory, but it's not the best option, because so if the problem is very specific to their home environment, it doesn't really benefit the dog a whole lot to bring the dog to me, and for me to train it for like 3, 4, 6 weeks. Because what will happen is, yes, I'll be able to work with that dog. The dog will learn some things, but then the moment that dog goes back, well, now it's back in its environment, and the problems that are arising as a result of certain triggers in the environment have not changed, have not been addressed in, on location. So if, for instance, the dog has a problem with the mother-in-law, right? The mother-in-law lives with them, and they go, yeah, I want to bring my dog for training to you. Well, I can train that dog, but that's not going to change the way the dog feels about your mother-in-law. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in that situation, I'll tell the client, the best option, and I'm just using that as an example. It could be anything that is particular to their environment. So in that instance, I'll tell the client, the best option is to work with you in your environment, like in your on your location, to address whatever misunderstanding or whatever issues are happening as a result of the particular triggers that are happening in your home. So then I'll discourage the boarding and training. So in that instance, the dog staying with me, yes, it'll help, but it will not address the issue that you're particularly concerned about. So in instances in which it is appropriate is if the dog's issues arise as a result of the dog not understanding obedience. So if there is something that I go, okay, your problem could be addressed if the dog understood what you were trying to tell it, right? In that instance, yes, it's easy for the dog to stay with me because I can teach the dog the language of obedience. Once the dog learns the language of obedience, now you and the dog have a common language. Now you can communicate with the dog through obedience. You know what I mean? That will help you with the issues that you're having, because now instead of the dog not knowing what it needs to do, you not knowing how to communicate to the dog not to do that will be addressed, because now the dog understands X, Y, and Z, and you also understand how to communicate X, Y, and Z. So in that instance, yes, it's better to bring the dog to me because I have the time to put in the thousands of repetitions. I have the time to train the dog, several times a day versus expecting the client to do that. Can the client do that? Absolutely, but it's going to put a lot more of a strain on their schedule because typically, they have jobs, they have other things that they're doing. And for me to tell them, all right, squeeze in 3-4 sessions a day on top of that, although possible, can be more difficult. So.
Okay. That does make sense, because I was wondering, basically the question, and I made it very long, but is it okay to send my dog to board and training program? And a lot depends on what is it that you're trying to fix. And
yeah.
Like you said, if it's because of a person in your house, sending it to you is not going to solve that issue.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that wraps up this week. Are you available next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will be back at it next week, and we will put the radio back to normal programming.